Right, I've pressed it, so you just need to check whether it is live streaming.
Yes, got it now.
It's live, is it?
Yep.
Okay, you should be good to go then, Chair. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Resources Committee virtual committee being held today. Could I remind members that the meeting will be live streamed on the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service website, and members of the public will be joining us. Could I also ask that members mute their microphone when not speaking, and that the chat function is available to inform the Chair when you'd like to ask any questions through the Chair. Just before we move to item number 1, I believe there's been an error in the printing of the numbers on the agenda. So when we go to each item, I will actually say the correct numbers. So apologies about that. Moving on to item number 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, I haven't received any apologies, but we have neither Councillor Coles nor Councillor. Councillor Yabsley is present, but I haven't heard from Councillor Coles, so I will submit his apology.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2, the minutes. Has everyone seen and read a copy of the last Resources Committee minutes held on the 2nd of July 2020, which are attached? Do you agree they are a true and accurate copy of the meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Oh, yeah, I'll second. Sorry, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign those the next time that I'm able to sign the paperwork. Moving on to item number 3. Are there any urgent items requiring my attention?
No, Chair, we don't have any.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Item number 4, the Treasury Management Performance 2020-21 Quarter 1 report. This is actually on pages 5 to 14 of our pack. And I believe we've got Adam with us to lead us through that. Adam Burleton.
Yep, Chair, can you still all hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. As in previous meetings, the purpose of the report is to report the performance in relation to the Treasury management activities for 2021. This is to the period June 2020. The report is brought to you for compliance with the CIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management. And the recommendation is it's brought to you twice a year, preferably quarterly, and that's what you do at this authority. In terms of the performance, I'm going to cover off an introduction that covers what you're required to bring to each meeting. In terms of the Treasury management strategy for Devon and Somerset Fire Authority, it's underpinned by the CIPFA Treasury Management Code of Practice. Off the economics. So what's happened since the last time we met? There's been a large change in economic output in the UK and other economies across the globe as a result of COVID. The central bank has cut interest rates to stimulate demand, and central government has also put in place measures to support businesses and individuals, and that's kept employment a lot high as B. The risk is that as that is unwound, the economic activity will slow further and unemployment will rise. There's a lot of information in the report. In general, it's basically the same across all economies. So we saw a big slowdown
Adam, are you still with us? I think we've lost Adam. Hello, Adam, are you with us? Steve, are you able to see if Adam's with us, or has he dropped out?
Chair, the quality was pretty poor while he was with us this end. I was assuming it was me.
He is with us. I think he's on mute.
The only thing I can suggest is if you can send me his mobile phone number through the chat function, I'll expel him and suggest that he rejoins.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Chair, should we go on to item 5 to save time?
Yes, just bear with me a second though, because I can't text and talk to item 5.
Amy for the second part, but I see where you're coming from.
Excuse me just a second.
It does look as if Adam is there twice. He's disappeared. I think he's gone to come back in again. He was appearing twice on the list of attendees. That's why he might have been having problems.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. I should have sent the number to Steve now if you wanted me to go ahead with item 5.
Yes, I think that would be a good suggestion. Thank you, Frank. So yes, if we can go on to item 5, please, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you. So from page 15 of your packs, you should have the Q1 of 2021 revenue and capital budget monitoring. And I will just take you through the paper briefly before coming back to the recommendations, if that's okay. So this is for the quarter ended June 2020, so 3 months behind now. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to prepare the Q2 in time for this meeting and the paper submission dates. But in terms of revenue, we're forecasting a relatively small underspend at the moment of 0.73%, and that equates to 566,000 for the year. The reasons for that are detailed below in the variance analysis, but mainly relate to the fact that we received quite a lot of COVID-19 grant funding from central government, which amounted to 1.6 million overall. So that makes up the majority of that variance. The majority of that we are spending, and there is more detail on that further down in the report. But at the moment, we're expecting around a £600,000 surplus to be carried forward to use for COVID related expenditure in the future. So just moving on to page 20, this discusses some budget transfers which we are asking the committee to consider and recommend the first one to the authority. So there's a transfer of 1.334 million for service delivery staff. This is actually a restructure of where those staff are categorised within our cost centres. So has a nil effect on the overall budget, but per the financial regulations need to go for consideration by the authority. And the next one relates to an accounting transaction, so no actual change to the budget, just where that's presented. And that's because the International Financial Reporting Standard on lease accounting was due to come in 2021. So the finance team correctly aligned the budgets between running costs and the loan charges in accordance with the IFRS 16, but that's actually been deferred now. So it will come in 2020-21. So that's effectively moving back the budget to how it was aligned in the last financial year. Obviously happy to take any questions on that. In terms of moving on to reserves, the forecast reserves and provisions are on page 21. And we're currently forecasting to spend £9.6 million from reserves this year, which will bring those down quite considerably. The majority of that's expected to be on the direct funding to capital. So you'll recall that there's been quite some a strategy over the last few years of putting in any underspends that we have into that capital fund. And the forecast expenditure on that is in table 6 on page 23. So there has been some development on the capital forecast since this report was produced, and obviously we'll bring an update on quarter two to the next committee meeting. But in terms of the estate rebuilds, there's significant work going on, particularly to Plymstock Fire Station, which has now received planning permission. So in terms of the major spend on that, that will go forward to 21-22. And lots of other work going on, particularly around the Plymouth area and Camel's Head Fire Station, which is a significant project. In terms of appliance replacements, I've personally signed off the orders for the first lot of medium rescue pumps, which are due now to be delivered in early 21-22. So we should have paid for the chassis within this financial year. However, the timelines for that are certain from our perspective in the service, but I'm aware that we've had some incidents of self-isolation with the supplier of those vehicles. So there might be a potential delay, but hopefully not more than 1 or 2 months as a result of that. And the procurement team are working hard to ensure that those vehicles are delivered on time, and obviously utilise that capital funding that the authority is designated there. The rest of the report talks about prudential indicators, and all of those are within the limits that were set for the year. And finally moves on to the age debt analysis with some narrative around that. I see that Adam's joined us again now, but I'm happy to take any questions on item 5 that we moved on to in terms of financial reporting.
Thank you very much, Amy. Councillor Coles, welcome to us. Sorry, there was a problem with transmission on item 4, so we went to 5. We will be going back to 4 shortly, so hopefully you picked up the pages. There's also a typing error. You may have noticed that the numbers don't correspond with the agenda in the pack, so I will be calling them out each time we go to a new item. Councillor Biedermann, I believe you have a question to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy, again for a very clear and concise report that's easy for even me to follow. Just a quick question, a couple of questions. Obviously, the narrative sort of gives us most of the information we need. But item 8, the cleaning costs, I was sort of rather surprised to see we were underspent on cleaning costs in this current environment. And you know, I've sort of done some work on school budgets, and the cleaning costs in schools have gone sky high. And I was sort of thinking that it was an area that we would find an upsurge in protective equipment. Similarly, I appreciate this is probably line is to do with protective equipment for firefighters, but I was assuming that we might have to be providing more protective type of equipment for the COVID response. Thank you.
Thank you. Just noting that there are some small underspends there on cleaning costs and protective equipment. So that's obviously not something we've included in the narrative there. But I can assure you that we have the protective measures in place to ensure that we are decontaminating any sites that might have come into additional risk from COVID, and obviously providing PPE. Fortunately, those items are actually covered by the COVID-19 grant that we've had from central government. So in terms of additional costs to the authority, we've got that well covered. Hopefully that answers your question, Frank.
Yeah, sorry, so that's kind of a different budget. No, I appreciate that. I was just interested, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the councillors from the team? Councillor Coles, yes, go ahead. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, no problem. Go ahead. No, you're on mute again. Sorry.
Oh, no, my fault. Fingers are too fat. My apologies. Okay. Amy, it's just a query on we have, according to the paper, some 600,000 remaining of the COVID government money. Bearing in mind that we are expecting to hear more about lockdown across the country later today from the Prime Minister, do we have the opportunity to ask for additional funds, depending on what level of lockdown happens, in Devon and Somerset?
Thank you. The way that the funding has worked is whether we can evidence that we've got additional cost as a result of any COVID-19 related activity. So it's not directly linked to the lockdown situation within a locality, it's linked to the actual costs we're experiencing. So I'm involved in collating that information from all English Fire and Rescue Services, and we'll be monitoring whether people have been spending their grant and therefore approach central government for more funding if needed. The Home Office did put in a £6 million contingency fund for those who had either spent their grant or were struggling, for example, within county services. And they received 5 applications for that, which they're not expecting to spend all of the £6 million in this award process. So the suggestion that's going forward to the Minister, which I fully support, is that they do a further round of that early in the new year. So if we use all of our grant and that 600,000 that we have left over, we'd have the opportunity to bid into that fund again.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Pert, if you'd like to ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's regarding the replacement fire engines through you, Chair, to Amy. Is that a fixed cost, or will there be any additional costs?
Thank you. So it's subject to contracted price, so it's a fixed cost. However, there is actually a risk to the prices there because of Brexit, and there's a potential that there will be a tariff imposed on any chassis that we import. Obviously, that was a risk we were aware of when we were letting the contract, but all the suppliers that that bid on that contract were reliant on overseas chassis builds. So it's not something that we could necessarily avoid. So at the moment, we are monitoring that situation and will obviously bring anything necessary back to the committee and authority in terms of needing to achieve additional funds on that.
Just as a supplementary then, Amy, do we have funds to deal with that depending on the increase? Are we covered, you say?
Given the size of our capital reserve at the moment, we're comfortable we could fund that in the short to medium term, but obviously that will impinge on our ability to pay for other assets like station rebuilds or more fire engines. So it's not something we're particularly keen on paying extra money for, but obviously if we have to, then we need to look at what else we're able to finance.
No, I understand that. Thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Chief, Lee, would you like to come in there?
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members, colleagues. Just a point of assurance, really. There is a narrative in terms of the spending, the training investment, obviously being underspent. And on paragraph 3.2, there's some narrative that sits around that in terms of why, and clearly some of the issues linked to COVID have had a bearing there. Just really to reassure members, I've just confirmed again today by looking at our service delivery dashboard, and all of our key competencies for our staff are at 95% or above. Breathing apparatus, for example, is at 99%. So I wouldn't want that to be seen out of context. We are continuing to bring all of our training back online, or as much as we can in a socially distanced environment. So that is providing some complexity. But just to reassure members that training, because I know training is a concern for members. Just to reassure members that we're on it, and actually the monitoring performance, and it's not perfect, but it's in a good place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for that. Councillor Pert again. Go ahead with your question and unmute yourself. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just what Lee's just regarded to. Also, I have a question on the pay for availability. It's still not agreed, but should be agreed in November. Do we have any more clarity on that?
Thank you. Looks like Lee wants to come in on that one.
No, just really in terms of the forecasted spend, Chair. clearly those discussions are ongoing. They are moving forward positively, and whilst we're not in a position to have finalised that at the moment, I'm confident that we will get to that point, and that would be a collective agreement with the Fire Union. We've already got agreement with the Fire and Rescue Service Association. Until that is in place, what we have been doing is on a voluntary basis, we've been establishing the pay for availability anyway. It's a model that we're rolling out across the service. If we can get a collective agreement in place, that means we can do that across the whole organisation. Will then mean that earmarked spend will be spent up more quickly. In the absence of a collective agreement, moving on a voluntary basis, it will take a bit longer, so there's more chance of an underspend on that particular budget line. But the principles are moving forward, and I'm confident we'll end up in a place where we all want to be. That helps.
Thank you again. Are there any other questions at all for Amy or the Chief on the report on item agenda number 5? I'll take that as a no then. Okay. Well, from the chair, I'd like to move the recommendation. The first recommendation we're going to need a vote on. So I'm just wondering if everyone is in agreement, but perhaps if they just raise their hand, and then I will come back again and ask if there's any against or any abstentions on it. So the recommendation A that we need to vote on is that the budget transfers shown in table 3 of this report be recommended to the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority for approval. Is that approved by the committee? All those in favour?
Chair, could you just go back a step and ask for a seconder, please, for that?
I do beg your pardon, I did forget. Is that seconded by someone?
Happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coles. Could we now go to the vote, please?
1, 2,
that looks like unanimous. Thank you very
6.
much, members. Thank you very much. Returning to, hopefully we've got Adam. Has Adam phoning in, or is he with us virtually on the line?
I don't think Adam is with us because he's having issues, although he's showing he was going to dial in, unless Adam can hear me talking now.
I don't think he can, Chair, so I will email Adam separately and suggest that he dials in.
Okay. Would it be appropriate to go on to item agenda number 6, or do you want to give him a few minutes to see if he can dial in?
Chair, I can see he's just come off the call again, so maybe he is trying to rejoin or attempting to dial in now. So if you don't mind pausing just perhaps for a minute or two, and then we can see if we can get him on the line.
Absolutely, Steve, no problem.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, if Adam is unable to connect at any point, I am happy to take the Treasury Management paper.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Chair, if I might just ask your indulgence, I was a few minutes late joining because I couldn't get it to open up properly. I even went to the extent of phoning Sam and Steve, so they'll have a message they can happily ignore from them. Suddenly it decided it was going to play, and I didn't do anything different from every other meeting, so I don't know. My excuse is it's a brand new piece of kit, and this is the first time I've tried to join a Webby meeting. I've done all the others, Zooms and what have you, but this is the first Webby. Just took a minute to click in, so I apologise for my.
No, don't worry. Lots of people having various different issues, so we will see if we can make it this time.
Chair, it looks as though Adam may have joined on his mobile phone, but I can't hear him. I don't know whether he is there. Are you there with us, Adam?
I am, Steve. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic.
Great. Okay. We'll go back to item agenda number 4 for everybody. That's Adam Burleton taking us through the Treasury Management Performance 2020 to 21 Q1 first report. And just to reconfirm, it's pages 5 to 14 of our papers. Okay. And go ahead, Adam, and welcome back again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Apologies for my inaccuracies with your IT. In terms of the report, It's a report on the Treasury Management Performance 2021 for Q1. So that's for the period to the end of June. It is a report to be noted by the committee in terms of the performance in relation to the Treasury management activities of the authority for that period. It is a requirement of the CIPFA Code to bring these reports at least twice a year, preferably quarterly, and that's what you do at this authority, so you comply with best practice. I'll go through the report in terms of the information that you need to have set out for you. In terms of the introduction, as I said at the outset, the Treasury management strategy for Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority underpins the adoption of the CIPFA codes. I'm not going to go into all the detail at the top of page 6, but I will cover off the economic background. In terms of the UK economy, at the start of the year, we were seeing some more positive sentiment in terms of GDP growth and outlook, but that didn't actually materialise into any growth numbers. And since then, we've had the coronavirus outbreak, and overall growth in the UK fell by 2.2% in the period to the end of March, and then another, which was 1.7% year on year. Unfortunately, there was a significant downturn in the economy during April, and that came in at minus 24.5 year on year. And that was as a result of the lockdown to the economy to prevent the spread of COVID. Behind the scenes, obviously, the government was putting in measures to support the economy through payments for furlough and payments to businesses, and supporting the public sector with large increases of grant payments. So that money has been flowing into the economy, support the economy. It has kept unemployment at a lower level, so we have kept more jobs in the UK, but there is a concern that as we come out of furlough and we end that scheme, if some businesses are no longer in a position to sustain the levels of employment they had before, then we will see an increasing growth in the unemployment number. Just to put in context, the same things were happening across Europe and America and our other main trading partners. The central bank obviously provided monetary stimulus. They cut interest rates to 0.5% and then cut them again. We came right down to 0.1, and that's where we expect bank rate to stay for some time. Unfortunately, what they also did is put quantitative easing in place. So there was another £200 billion of quantitative easing and then another 100 billion on top. So what that does is basically allows the money to flow into the economy by banks buying back, the central bank buying back bonds and creating liquidity in the market. So it's similar to a bank rate cut. And we expect the central bank to do more of that if the economy slows further, rather than cut interest rates to negative. But there is a real risk that we may experience negative interest rates in the UK. It's not part of our central case, but that is something just to flag that will start to feed into rates that your Treasury team are earning on cash, and therefore there is a risk that we might see real negative rates being asked for. You have to pay to part the money with those banks or even government institutions. And we have seen the government sort of central support mechanism for investing with local authorities cut to negative rates for very short dates. So it's also had a big impact on the downward movement in inflation. So whilst the central bank does target inflation at 2%, we are currently at 0.2, and we expect that inflation could fall further and we might get towards zero by the end of the year. There's been a big downward pressure on wage growth, and there's been a lot of downward pressure on things like commodity prices, oil prices, and also VAT cuts and the eat out to help out schemes have all helped lower prices across the economy. So we are seeing lower inflation in the UK. That will help the central bank keep monetary policy a lot looser for a lot longer. US, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but US saw a very big slowdown in terms of growth, in terms of their unemployment numbers, and they lost 20 million jobs in April. We have seen those starting to recover, but their unemployment level has moved up to around 8%. It was a bit higher, but it has started to come back down as their economy started to unlock. And again, we're like with all the major economies who have been locking down their economies, as they unlock, if they go back into a second phase and lock down again, that will have a follow-on impact. And the European Union is doing very similar things. So whilst the European Union's unemployment and UK's unemployment has stayed relatively lower, the US has moved up. It is starting to come back down again. Other parts of the world economy have come out of the coronavirus crisis and have grown a bit faster. China has recovered some of the loss of economic output it experienced during lockdown. Japan has still been struggling, and overall world growth is expecting to be depressed this year as a result of coronavirus and the major impact that's caused in terms of a recession in growth in 2020. So feeding all that into what we think will happen to interest rates, we've shortened the duration of our forecast just because of the period of uncertainty. We can't really project out much further than the current 2-year window that we've got in this report, but we don't expect bank rate to change. As I said at the outset, there is a risk that the Bank of England might consider cutting interest rates to negative, and you might pick up more of that in the press because they are talking about it. It's something the previous governor didn't do, so there is a risk of that happening. One thing you will see if interest rates stay where they are is that the LIBOR rates, which you sometimes see as your benchmark, will be moving towards a negative position. So whilst you might achieve a positive output on a return on cash, the benchmarks you're comparing yourself with are moving to a negative territory, and that's just signs that the markets are pricing that risk in, and there's also an awful lot of cash in the market. You don't borrow, but borrowing rates have remained quite high and have sort of traded in a sideways movement. It doesn't affect you because you're raising your capital investment through your own cash, but it's just something to keep an eye on if you were planning on doing any borrowing in the future. They're relatively stable at the moment. They could move higher if we come out of this and get some sort of recovery. In terms of the annual investment strategy, as we touched on before, the aim is for security of capital, liquidity, then yield, and that's what you emphasize in your strategy. In terms of complying with that and the investments you had, at the bottom of page 11, the average level of investments held for investment purposes during the quarter was 42.1 million. It was 39.886 million at the end of 1920, so slightly higher than the year-end position, which is expected. And that balance tends to move back down as you progress through the year. You are achieving, or at the time of the report, you were achieving an authority performance of 0.85 against a benchmark rate of 0.26. The expectation was that you would outperform your budgeted income target by 0.071 million. The caveat is that for the remainder of this financial year, as a result of what's happened to the interest rate market, is that you will be reinvesting in a lower market rate, and therefore you may not get that performance coming through. In terms of the prudential indicators, you've complied with your requirements. There is a full list in another report, but you are complying with all your indicators. As per previous reports, you haven't taken any external borrowing since June 2012. You don't expect to take any new loans this year. The amount of borrowing for the year currently stands at 25.4. It is forecast to reduce to 24.8, and that should be in line with your capital finance requirement to year end. It has an average rate of 4.21 and an average life of 25 years, and there have been no rescheduling opportunities due to the high premiums that are charged by Public Works Loans Board. We are continuing to look at that, but it's too expensive to repay at the moment. As I said, no new loans taken, and you haven't had any borrowing in advance of need. Just so you can see in terms of where interest rates have moved, they came down a bit. They did spike up at the beginning of March, towards the end of March. But in this quarter, to the end of June, they've been reasonably stable. The high point in terms of long-term borrowing costs was 245 and the low point 213. And right at the short end, it was 194 against 177. So using your own cash avoids that borrowing cost to the authority. So in summary and recommendation, in compliance with the requirements of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, the report provides the committee with the first quarter's report on treasury management activities to the period end of June. There were no breaches of indicators, and you are expecting to achieve a slightly better investment return than budget. But as I said, there's a possibility that due to falling interest rates, that might be more difficult to achieve in the current environment. That is the report. There is a list of all the investments that were held at the end of June in the appendix, and I think Amy and Andrew might be able to confirm that of the fixed deposits, 2 of those remain. The rest will have been refinanced or matured and refinanced. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adam, for another in-depth report. It must be getting difficult given the what's going on at the moment worldwide. So thank you for any extra time you've spent on compiling the report for us. It is much appreciated. Does anyone have any questions from the committee for Adam on the report? Looks like there aren't any questions there. Okay. The recommendation is that the performance in relation to the Treasury management activities for the authority for 2020-21 till June 2020 be noted.
Happy to recommend that, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Pert to second.
Yeah, second that. Thank you, Chair.
All agreed? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Moving on. Oh, Adam, thank you very much.
The meeting.
I was going to say, yes, thank you very much for dialing in, and sorry about the problems you've had.
Hopefully it'll work better next time. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam. Thank you for your time as well. Thank you. Bye-bye now. Moving on to item agenda number 6, the Reserve Strategy 2020-2021, and this is on page 27 to 38 of our pack. And get it right. Okay. And Amy, would you like to take us through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to. So as you say, this reserve strategy is from page 27 onwards. This is the third version of these strategies that we brought forward. It's part of the requirement under the National Framework for Fire and Rescue Services that we have a public-facing reserve strategy, and so therefore if the committee is minded to approve this document to the authority, it will be published on our website. This has been slightly delayed this year, which usually be done as part of the year-end process. The reason for that is that we need to understand better the outcome of COVID and how that would feed into the risk assessment of the reserves. So that has now been fed in. And I will refer you all to the risk assessment, which is detailed in the appendix, page 36 and 37. I'll come back to that in a bit after going through the main report. So the beginning of the report sets out the strategic context and the purpose of our reserves and provisions, talking about the long-term sustainability and risks and impacts to the revenue budget, which means that we have to have reserves in place. It then talks about the risk assessment of the general reserve. So our general reserve sits at £5.3 million, and that's usually measured as a percentage of the net revenue budget. The minimum recommended level is 5%, and ours currently is 6.88%. However, we've taken a more detailed approach of actually doing a risk assessment of where those financial pressures might come from. And having reviewed that in light of COVID, in paragraph 4.5 talk about that total risk sitting at 5.133 million. As the general reserve is 5.316, we haven't put forward any recommendations about changing the level that's set at because it's deemed to be adequate. The next section goes on to talk about the annual review of earmarked reserves. So this is the culmination of the expenditure which happened in the last financial year and balances, together with any recommendations that were taken by the committee in terms of the year-end positions. That's all been fed back in and also talks about the purpose of each of those categories of reserves. So hopefully that's all fairly straightforward and no major changes from the previous year. So if I can move on to the appendix, hopefully you'll be able to see there's quite some detail in there in terms of the risks that we face. This is on page 36 and 37. And that scores each of those risks against the likelihood and impact. So that brings out the net impact. So just to talk you through an example of how that works, treasury management income, which we've just been referring to in Adam's report, is halfway down the first page, and our revenue budget is set at just around 200,000. So I'm aware from discussion with Adam that the interest rates we can achieve from the market are now likely to reduce to 0%, in fact, maybe negative. So obviously, Andrew and the finance team were working really hard on making sure we get some sort of return. Last year, that was set at a low risk because of the historic experience of achieving and, in fact, overachieving against that budget. But I've now changed that to a high risk. So I consider that there's a high risk that we won't achieve that £200,000, and therefore the impact is measured at 151,000 for the year. So all of those add up to the £5.133 million assessment that I've made on the general reserve. So appreciate that's been quite detailed, but I just wanted to talk you through how that's built up and the factors that are taken into account in that risk assessment. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, Councillor Wheeler, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. On Appendix B, this is on page 38, there's a line, percentage of general reserve compared to net budget, which doesn't have any figures in it. Should it have something in it, please?
Yes, apologies, Councillor Wheeler. The corner of that table has been inadvertently cut off by myself when I put it into the paper. That represents 6.88% of the net revenue budget.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Does anyone else have a question at all on the report from Amy? No? Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Coles, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's on the provision for a doubtful debt. I don't want to go into this in open session other than to say, is it the debt is where I think it is, and we are obviously looking at that later in the meeting. Would that be a fair assessment, Amy?
Thank you. So we look at our total debts at the end of each financial year and review the appropriateness of a provision, which can obviously be up or down and released back into the revenue budget.
Did that answer your question, Councillor Coles?
I think the question will get answered later in the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any more questions or any other questions for Amy at all on item agenda number 6, the reserve strategy? That's looking like none. Okay. The recommendation is that the committee recommends the reserve strategy to the full authority for publication. Could I have a show of hands that everyone agrees?
Happy to so propose, Chair.
Thank you very much. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll be happy to second that, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Ray. Ron. Right. Moving on to item agenda number 7. I'd like to move the recommendations as printed on the agenda for the exclusion of the press and public. In accordance with section 100A subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public, with the exceptions of Dr. George, Lisa Compton and other directors of Red One Limited, and councillors Andrew Saywell and David Thomas, the authority appointed directors, be excluded from the meeting for the following terms of business on the grounds that they are likely any exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 of section 12A as amended of the Act. Is that seconded?
Yes, happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I now formally close the meeting, and we'll see you in the part 2 meeting shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I'll close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.